noticed anything that gives you a red flag as a doctor?
Once you start manifesting the hallmark motor symptoms,
right?
Slow movement, rigidity, mass facies, hypophonia. I mean, if a med student did not pick Parkinson's on the test, they'd be remediated. You know, I'm a Democrat. I always say about this.
Right.
It's just like, this guy is not a hard case.
I want to get right to this video. I think this may be the most consequential analysis of the medical condition we see before us right now with the President of the United States, Joe Biden. Now, sadly, this appeared on NBC News Now. Yeah, that's NBC's streaming service where they give news and yada, yada, yada. I need you to watch this. I need you to pay attention to it. And then I need you to share this wherever you can. This needs to be seen everywhere. NBC News did their due diligence. Oh, look, we're talking to an analyst here. We're talking to a doctor and an expert. Why isn't this on NBC Nightly News? Why isn't this on MSNBC? Why isn't this on the Today Show? They're burying it. You need to see it right now, and then you need to share it. Take a look.
You noticed anything that gives you a red flag as a doctor?
Oh, yeah, I see him 20 times a day in clinic. I mean, it's ironic because he has just such classic features of neurodegeneration. I mean, word finding difficulties, and that's not, oh, I couldn't find the word. That's from degeneration of the word retrieval area.
He's also overcome stuttering, though. Could that be part of that, too?
No, this is not a palatal issue or a speech discrepancy, which is very different from a lemma dysfunction, actual word retrieval, where you pick a similar question or talk around the issue, plus the rigidity, monotone voice.
Wait, go back to that, the rigidity. What do you mean?
Rigidity. Loss of arm swing, standing up lordotically. You notice when he turns, it's kind of end block turning. It's not a quick turn. So that's one of the hallmarks of Parkinsonism is rigidity and bradykinesia, slow movement. And he has that hallmark, especially with the low voice that said was a cold, hypophonia. A small monotone voice like this over time is a hallmark of Parkinsonism. I could have diagnosed him from across the mall.
Here are some of the symptoms from Parkinson's. We just had them up there on the screen. If we can put them back. What about the movement? Some people have pointed out the way he walks. Sometimes it's not very fast, small steps. Is that something that is common in people who are battling a disease like Parkinson's?
Yeah, it's a hallmark. Shuffling gait, we call that. So little steps. Loss of arm swing from the rigidity. When we walk, we have a nice cadence. You notice he doesn't really swing his arms. And end block turning, meaning he kind of pivots around his foot. If you said, hey, President Biden, he wouldn't go like this. So, yeah.
But I also know, and tell me if I'm wrong here, it's very hard to diagnose Parkinson's, isn't it? It's not simple. I mean, I've heard that it can be.
It's one of the easier movement disorders to diagnose, actually.
Right,
but it's so clinic. There's very little other. And I'm a Democrat. I always say about this.
Right.
It's just like, this guy is not a hard case.
But I've had relatives who have gone through neurological issues, and I've heard that sometimes Parkinson's is not very easy to nail. You have to take a lot of tests.
It's early on. If you're just presented with like hallucinations, that could be a variety of things, or just the cognitive problems. That could be Alzheimer's versus Parkinsonism, and that becomes a little nebulous. But once you start manifesting the hallmark motor symptoms,
right? Slow
movement, rigidity, mass facies, hypophonia. I mean, if a med student did not pick Parkinson's on the test, they'd be remediated.
So let me ask you, you're a Democrat, you're a doctor. You sound like you're frustrated with what the White House is saying.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, because, I'm an American before everything. And I look at it and say, when I used to see Russia, Soviet Union, North Korea, when they just make outrageous things, like when North Korea can't keep the lights on and they say, oh, it was some faulty power thing. I kind of hate that kind of stuff. They had 4 years. My own party had 4 years to find, this was a wreck in slow motion. And they had 4 years to find out of 350 Americans, one person that could take the place. And here we are the day before school trying to do the homework and replace a guy who's got a neurodegenerative disease.
Wow. 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 Did you follow that? And how clear that was? How straightforward it was? Okay, what NBC News Now, NBC's online streaming news service. Great find from the X account, End Wokeness. Those guys are great. Or that guy is great, or that gal is great. You're great, End Wokeness. Absolutely devastating. Absolutely 1,000% devastating. And I'm not one for, television diagnoses of people. All right. But I got to tell you something. And forgive me for telling tales out of school. I'm not going to name any names. I have a friend of mine. Who has actually been diagnosed with Parkinson's. And I am telling you, 8 months ago, this friend of mine said, Biden's got Parkinson's. 8 months ago. And he's not alone. There are other people, there are other doctors, there are other individuals who either know someone with Parkinson's or have Parkinson's themselves, and they're all keeping their mouth shut. This guy deserves a medal for speaking out. I want to break this down just a little bit with you, if we could.
Just anything that gives you a red flag as a doctor?
Oh, yeah. I see him 20 times a day in clinic. I mean, it's ironic because he has just such classic features of neurodegeneration. I mean, word finding difficulties, and that's not, oh, I couldn't find the word. That's from degeneration of the word retrieval area.
He's also overcome stuttering, though. Could that be part of that, too?
No, this is not a palatal issue or a speech discrepancy, which is very different from a lemmonode dysfunction, actual word retrieval, where you pick a similar question or talk around the issue, plus the rigidity, monotone voice.
Wait, go back to that, the rigidity. What do you mean?
Yeah, we'll get to the rigidity in a moment, but did you hear what he had to say there about the distinction here with stuttering versus actually not being able to find a word? All right, that's the difference. If you've met somebody with a stutter, a speech impediment, they'll have trouble saying a word, and then they'll immediately find the replacement word to say it instead. Right? That's one of the things that they do to adapt to the speech impediment they had. This brings us to this article. I believe this is in the New York Magazine expose that's recently been put out. Clay Travis put this out on X and found this part. During a fundraiser at the Four Seasons in New York in June 2023, Biden spoke for 5 to 10 minutes. 5 to 10 minutes. You're spending, $50, $60, $100,000 to have dinner with Biden. He speaks 5 to 10 minutes. What a guy. Then he took a few questions. This is according to attendees who bought a ticket. They were struck by how fragile he seemed. At one point, Biden couldn't recall the word for veteran. The president asked the group to help him find the word, saying he wanted to refer to a person who had served in the Army or Navy. That's not a stutter. That's not a speech impediment. That's, I don't have the word. I don't know what the word is. I know the definition of the word. Help me out. And listen, we all have moments, okay? Happens to me all the time. I also broadcast 5 hours a day. So sometimes your brain turns to mush. That's not his situation. Right now we get into the rigidity thing, something that we all remember when we all had our cheap fakes that got put out there showing Biden standing rigid at the Juneteenth celebration where he was literally frozen? Or what about the time at the fundraiser in Los Angeles where, again, he was rigid and frozen and Obama had to snap him out of it? Cheap fakes. You're lying. You're lying. That's the rigidity we're talking about. Listen.
Rigidity, loss of arm swing, standing up lordotically. You notice when he turns, it's kind of end block turning. It's not a quick turn. So that's one of the hallmarks of Parkinsonism is rigidity and bradykinesia, slow movement. And he has that hallmark, especially with the
rigidity and bradykinesia. That would be the slow. And again, my friend who has Parkinson's, this is all sort of, it all fits together. It's a puzzle piece here. Slow movement. Instead of, somebody says your name and you go, what's going on, man? Right? That's what you would do. Well, remember this moment from like 2 weeks ago?
Mr. President, can you tell us, sir, Donald Trump refers to himself as a political prisoner and blames you directly. What's your response to that, sir? You think
yeah, we all remember that from a couple of weeks ago. That's exactly what he's describing. It's exactly what he's describing. This is so devastating what this doctor has done here. He's an expert on Parkinson's.
Low voice is said was a cold. Hypophonia, a small monotone voice like this over time is a hallmark of Parkinsonism.
What have I been telling you about the slow voice, the low voice? This is why he has to have the microphone. I've been telling you this for how many weeks and how many months now on this show? Don't you find it weird that he's sitting there with the presidential podium with those microphones right there Everybody comes up and talks. Everybody's introducing the president or saying their thing. Then it's time for the president to come up and give his remarks. And those exact same microphones that were used on the podium to pick up everybody else who spoke aren't sufficient for Joe Biden. He picks up a handheld microphone. And it's not because he's going to leave the podium and go sing a song like Tom Jones in the finale of his concert or something. It's not karaoke night at the White House. He uses a handheld microphone because his voice is so low, so soft, so weakened by his condition that he has to hold that microphone there and they have to raise the gain on it so high to even pick him up. That's why at the debate, when they didn't have that benefit of a handheld microphone, it was so acute. It was so astounding. It was so jarring because we hadn't seen that because they'd been covering it up this whole time. And they even covered it up that night because people were saying, what's wrong with his voice? What's wrong with his voice? And what did they say? Oh, he had a cold. He didn't have a cold. Of course he didn't have a cold.
I could have diagnosed him from across the mall.
Here are some of the symptoms from Parkinson's. We just had him up there on the screen. If we can put him back. What about the movement? Some people have.
Look at this. Look at this. I don't know about the tremor. I haven't seen him, but he keeps himself messed. You know how he walks with his hands right down on his hips? And it looks like his upper body doesn't walk. Think about it. Imagine what it looks like when he's walking from the helicopter and it's just like from the hips down and the upper body doesn't move. The reason that he keeps his hands down, or he always got something in his hands, he's always walking around with his sunglasses in his hands. It's to keep the hand from tremoring. This is what people do to hide these effects. The rigidity we see all the time, the slow movement. I mean, come on, you've seen him walking. Masked face. That's that blank look that he's got so often that was so evident at the debate, and then the soft and the low voice. This is, I mean, it's textbook what this doctor is saying, and he's being so rapid fire, so matter of fact. And now, as we get into this part of the interview, thank you for walking through this segment with me again, because I think it's so important and so impactful and so devastating. Please share this around because it won't be seen, because NBC News even tried to bury it. When the reporter tries to push back on so many things, it's hilarious.
Have pointed out the way he walks. Sometimes it's not very fast, small steps. Is that something that is common in people who are battling a disease like Parkinson's?
Yeah, it's a hallmark. Shuffling gait, we call that. So little steps. Loss of arm swing from the rigidity. When we walk, we have a nice cadence. You notice he doesn't really swing his arms. And end block turning, meaning he kind of pivots around his foot. If you said, hey, President Biden, he wouldn't go like this. So, yeah.
But I also know, tell me if I'm wrong here, it's very hard to diagnose Parkinson's, isn't it?
I love this. Isn't it hard to diagnose Parkinson's? He's asking the Parkinson's expert. And I'll tell you, there is a process, again, because I've got a friend who's been through this. There is a process that they go through to eliminate a lot of other things, right, before they land on Parkinson's. So it's a process, but it's not that it's difficult. It's just that you want to eliminate what else it might be before you put somebody on a diagnosis that involves some pretty heavy-duty pharmaceuticals to get you through the day.
It's not simple. I mean, I've heard that it can be.
By the way, I love this guy. Watch his face when he's asked. It's kind of hard to diagnose this, right? And the dude's like, "No." Watch his face. Keep your eye on the doctor's face.
Isn't it? It's not simple. I mean, I've heard that it can be.
It's one of the easier movement disorders to diagnose, actually,
right?
Because it's so clinic. There's very little other. And I'm a Democrat. I always say about this.
I love that he's sitting there in the studio of NBC and he feels like he has to bend over backwards and say, "By the way, don't get me wrong. I'm no MAGA fascist racist creep. I'm a Democrat, right? So it's like, don't come at me, bro." All right. I'm just, you asked me here as a doctor. I'm telling you the truth as a doctor, because this guy's suddenly getting combative. Isn't it true that it's not that easy to diagnose this? Isn't it true that you voted for Trump? Isn't it true that you have MAGA underwear?
Right.
It's just like, this guy is not a hard case.
But I've had relatives who have gone through neurological issues, and I've heard that sometimes Parkinson's is not very easy to nail. You have to take a lot of tests.
It's early on. If you're just presented with like hallucinations, that could be a variety of things, or just the cognitive problems. That could be Alzheimer's versus Parkinsonism, and that becomes a little nebulous. But once you start manifesting the hallmark motor symptoms,
right? Slow
movement, rigidity, mass facies, hypophonia. I mean, if a med student did not pick Parkinson's on the test, they'd be remediated.
So let me ask,
how great is that? If you're a med student and you're watching Joe Biden and you're given multiple choice on what his condition is and you don't pick Parkinson's, you failed. Am I wrong? Is this not devastating? Like absolutely toast. Nobody can watch this and not recognize some very important things. And by the way, I just want to take a moment here again, because I'm sensitive to this. I'm sensitive to people who may have this condition. I think one of the most heroic things I've seen in my lifetime, Michael J. Fox living with and being a beacon of hope and an example to people who have Parkinson's disease. I think it's noble and fantastic. To hell with Michael J. Fox. How about Pope John Paul II, Saint Pope John Paul II the Great, who lived with Parkinson's for years? Remember the courage when his hand was trembling as he blessed himself and blessed the Blessed Sacrament when he was presiding over Mass, and he was hunched over and his movements were restricted, but he was a shining beacon, an example, especially as the pontiff and the vicar of Christ, the example of love and faith and hope and charity here on the planet, that people who have debilitating diseases still deserve respect and honor and love, that they are not disposable, that they are still useful and impactful in our lives. That's very important here, okay? I'm not suggesting that if you get Parkinson's disease, you're done. Your life is over, that you can't bring something useful to the table. In fact, I think the White House is playing this so wrong. If they were honest with us, and that's the key, Joe Biden could actually emerge as some sort of heroic figure here. It's too late now, though, because the story isn't even about Joe Biden's condition anymore, because it's so obvious he has a condition. The story is this massive cover-up, this massive, cynical, deceitful cover-up that continues to this day, that Kamala Harris is a part of. And if she thinks she can just ascend to the throne when all of this is over, she's got another thing coming, because she's part of this. She's part of the criminal behavior we're seeing right now, keeping the truth from the American people. All right, I just want to make sure that you all recognize that, because I've said what I've said here.
Unless you're a Democrat, you're a doctor, you sound like you're frustrated with what the White House is saying.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, because, I'm an American before everything. And I look at it and say, when I used to see Russia, Soviet Union, North Korea, when they just make outrageous things, like when North Korea can't keep the lights on and they say, it was some faulty power thing. I kind of hate that kind of stuff. They had 4 years. My own party had 4 years to find, this was a wreck in slow motion. And they had 4 years to find, out of 350 Americans, one person that could take the place. And here we are the day before school trying to do the homework and replace a guy who's got a neurodegenerative disease.
That's right. That's amazing. I'll say it again. Absolutely devastating. Absolutely devastating segment there. And that should be it. Anyone who sees that, it's over. And I do you got to love the fact that this man, this Democrat, just compared his party and the White House run by his party apparatchiks, compared them to the Soviet Union and North Korea in their ability to lie to your face and then act like you're the problem if you dare to challenge the lie. To that end, speaking of the lie, speaking of the cover-up, yesterday, after Karine Jean-Pierre's press conference, which we'll get to a little bit later in the program, President Biden's personal physician, Kevin O'Connor, no relation, put out a statement further clarifying the examinations that the president has undergone with regard to a neurological specialist who is an expert in Parkinson's disease. And he put out bullet items here from his examinations. The president's gait remains stiff, but has not worsened since last year. Really? Apparently, Kevin O'Connor is also legally blind. Examination this year was unchanged with the exception of possibly tighter hamstrings and calves. It's from all that biking. And then pay close attention to this. An extremely detailed neurological exam was again reassuring in that there were no findings which would be consistent with any cerebellar or other central neurological disorder, such as stroke, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, or ascending lateral sclerosis. This exam did again support a mild peripheral neuropathy in both feet. He did not demonstrate any motor weakness, but a subtle difference in heat-cold sensation could be elicited. All right, and on and on. But did you notice that? No indication of multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, or ascending lateral sclerosis. Well, that sounds pretty detailed and experty. Who are we to quibble with the doctor's findings? That's the president's physician, after all. There's just one problem with it. It was analyzed, and thank you to Greg Ree on the X platform for sharing this. Biden's doctor, Kevin O'Connor, reported that Biden shows no signs of ascending lateral sclerosis. Karine Jean-Pierre repeated it yesterday. Here's the problem. Ascending lateral sclerosis is not an actual condition. There's no such thing as ascending lateral sclerosis. He may have meant to say amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. That's ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. I've spoken to top neurologists who say they do not know what ascending lateral sclerosis is and what it would even refer to. It's more evidence that O'Connor, no relation, is incompetent and or did not write the letter giving Biden the green light. Certainly no neurologist did. I mean, that's troubling, isn't it? Meanwhile, over on CNN, Jake Tapper has suddenly decided to pretend to be an impartial journalist. He has decided that the American people cannot be fooled or lied to anymore. So he's now all in on reality. He's decided to move his chips on the roulette table over to the spot that represents reality. So here he was yesterday, going through the recent remarks from President Biden and pointing out to everyone in the world what everyone in the world knows already.
In reality, 72% of voters say that they believe President Biden is too old. That's according to CNN's most recent polling. Voters have been saying this for quite a long time. The reality is that the Democratic elites are mostly late to acknowledge these age and ability issues compared to the rest of the public. The elites have been forced to reckon with it after the debate just 11 days ago.
Look at my career. I've not had many of those nights. It was a terrible night, and I really regret it happened. But the fact of the matter is, how can you assure you're going to be on faith that can intervene on your way to go to, work tomorrow? Age wasn't, the idea I'm too old.
The fact of the matter is, how can you assure you're going to be out on your way to go, work tomorrow? Age wasn't, the idea that I'm too old. Keep in mind, that soundbite is supposed to be reassuring to those Democratic supporters who have gone wobbly. Many Democratic officials with whom I've spoken are worried that President Biden and his family and his inner circle appear to be in complete denial, not just about whatever might be wrong with him, but the state of his candidacy right now.
Jake Tapper doing some shtick that we were doing about 4 years ago. You play a clip of Biden saying something, you cut back, and then you read the transcript of what he just said and said, what the hell is this guy saying? Literally 4 years ago. Remember when he was campaigning? We hold these truths to be self-evident, that we gotta go, the thing. This is nothing new, Jake. Welcome to the party, pal. And by the way, quit copying our bit. I'm a little annoyed now. That's our shtick. Stop watching the show. Before anybody, I got to tell you, I'm so annoyed at people on my side of the political equation, even journalists and political commentators like me who spent time yesterday on X saying, credit where credit is due. Jake Tapper is being honest, that he deserves credit for doing this. He deserves credit for being honest. Shouldn't that sort of be the baseline for the profession, guys? Let's not forget who Jake Tapper is. Let's not forget 4 years ago when he had the opportunity to be honest and pursue the truth. During the campaign, the president's daughter-in-law, now the chairwoman of the Republican National Committee, but she was one of the spokespeople for the re-election campaign. She appeared on Jake Tapper's show, and she pointed out the obvious neurological cognitive pathologies that we're all witnessing with Joe Biden, to point out that he is not physically fit to serve. Now, look what happened with Jake Tapper 4 years ago when Laura Trump pointed out basically what Jake Tapper just did on his show yesterday.
Every time he comes on stage or they turn to him, I'm like, Joe, can you get it out? Let's get the words out, Joe. You kind of feel bad for him.
How do you think it makes little kids with stutters feel when they see you make a comment like that?
First and foremost, I had no idea that Joe Biden ever suffered from a stutter. I think what we see on stage with Joe Biden, Jake, is very clearly a cognitive decline.
Okay.
That's what I'm referring to. It makes me uncomfortable.
You have
to watch somebody on stage search for
that's so amazing.
questions
It's so amazing to me
and,
that
and try and figure out an answer.
a cognitive
But when
decline.
you're trying to tell me that what I was suggesting was
I think that you
stuttering,
were mocking his
I had no
stutter.
idea, Joe
Yeah,
Biden.
I think you were mocking his stutter, and I think you have absolutely no
Jake.
standing to diagnose
Wow.
somebody's cognitive decline. I would think
I'm not
that
diagnosing,
somebody in
I'm
the
saying
Trump
that
family would
we
be
see
more
that Joe
sensitive
Biden of
to people who
today
do not have medical
was not the Joe
licenses,
Biden of 5
diagnosing
years ago,
politicians
of 10
from
years ago.
afar. Plenty of people have diagnosed your father from afar, and I'm sure it offends you. Your father-in-law from afar. I'm sure it offends you. You don't have any
I'm
standing
not
to say.
diagnosing him. What I'm saying,
You
Jake,
just talked
is that
about a
we
cognitive
can clearly
decline.
see that Joe Biden
I have
is
one last
struggling
question for you, Laura. You can't.
times on stage, and it's very concerning to a lot of people that this could be the leader of the free world.
Okay.
That is all I'm saying. I genuinely
you,
feel
Laura
sorry
Trump.
for Joe Biden.
I appreciate.
Yeah, and then he kicked her off the show. Screw you, Jake Tapper. Screw you. How do you think little children feel? Little children with stutters. How do you think they feel about you making fun of the president? He's overcome a stutter, don't you know? Don't forget, everybody who wants to give credit to Jake Tapper for 4 years later coming around to reality and not using his show and his platform and his network as a political weapon against people he holds a grudge against. And just remember, hold on. Where is it? I got to see that face right there. That's the Jake Tapper face to remember at all time. That smug arrogance. That smug, smart-ass arrogance who holds people in contempt for daring to step forward and say, I think we're seeing some cognitive decline with Joe Biden. Look at that face. That's Jake Tapper, not this guy who now suddenly decides that he's got to, let's see which way things are going. Yeah, you know what? I better have some semblance of credibility left. You know, I better at least dip my toe in the water of reality over here. And by the way, the segment from yesterday, when Jake Tapper is pointing out, it's clear the president has suffered some sort of decline here. It's clear that the president has trouble getting words out. It's clear this, it's clear that. I'm sorry, are you giving a medical diagnosis from afar, Jake? Just like Laura Trump did on your show 4 years ago when you kicked her off? What a smug, arrogant. He's the worst. You know, I remember working for the sainted Andrew Breitbart, who watches over me every single day we do this. And I was the editor of Breitbart TV. My job was to pull video mostly from cable news of people saying and doing outrageous things that would annoy you. And then, well, you know, like the videos we do on the show here every day, and get you fired up. And I would post those videos on Breitbart TV, and then they get shared on social media and used in talk radio. And that's what's my job. And I remember Andrew called me one day and he says, dude, you're posting too much MSNBC stuff. You know, Keith Olbermann and, oh boy, back in the glory days of Keith Olbermann and Ed Schultz and the whole lineup there at MSNBC. And it's like, it's all MSNBC, Al Sharpton. And I'm like, yeah, well, Andrew, that's the money videos, man. I mean, these are the people, they're nuts and they've given us great content. He goes, I don't care anymore about MSNBC. MSNBC is who they are. They've already decided who they are. They don't hide it. You know, Keith Olbermann will tell you who he is out front. Okay, this is Andrew Breitbart talking to me. They're not the problem. CNN is the problem. The problem is CNN. The problem is Wolf Blitzer. The problem is Anderson Cooper. The problem are people like Jake Tapper who pretend like they're not partisan. They pretend like they're not activists. They pretend like they're objective. They're just following the truth and they're just following the facts. They pretend like they're real journalists who don't get involved in such petty fights. Oh, really? Look at that face. Look at that face. Andrew Breitbart, as usual, was right. The problem is Jake Tapper. That said, one more clip from Jake yesterday when he did bring on a medical professional, Sanjay Gupta. He's the resident quack there on CNN. Don't forget, he's the one who made sure you wore a mask and got injected and social distance during COVID. But that's okay. He got a raise probably at the end of that. And, well, Jake asked Sanjay Gupta to do exactly what he just admonished Laura Trump not to do, and that is to give an opinion about President Trump's medical condition. Excuse me, President Biden's medical condition.
What was your reaction to the debate? What did you think as a doctor?
Well, there was concern, I think, from the go, frankly. First question you asked, I think right away when I watched again, if it were my dad, there was cause for concern. Stumbling of speech, sort of confused rambling at times, and then also motor symptoms, lack of expression in the face. None of those things are diagnostic of anything. I just want to be clear about that. But in aggregate, they are flags. And I think anybody, and unanimously from the medical professionals I've heard, they would advocate for testing based on what they saw at that debate.
All right. That's a good wrap up there of the diagnoses. Again, I want to remind you to please share this video. This segment in particular, it'll be published up at, whatever platform you're watching this on right now. It'll be published a little later in the afternoon because that doctor, what's his name again? The doctor on NBC now. Oh, I had his name there a second ago. Well, that doctor, the Parkinson's expert, needs to be seen and shared far and wide. Dr. Tom Pitts, neurologist, Dr. Tom Pitts, a phenomenal segment that basically should have put an end to all the speculation, all of the lies, and all of the obfuscating, all of the propaganda from the White House. It's over. It's over. The man is toast. He's been lying and covering up from the beginning, and they're all in on it. All of them. Oh, and one last thing. Jake Tapper.